So, back in early 2026, the world was watching as one U.S. administration launched two totally different military campaigns. One was this incredibly fast regime change right in America's own hemisphere. The other, a brutal, escalating war over in the Middle East. And that's the big question, right? How can the same administration, using what seemed like a similar playbook, get such wildly different results? One conflict was over in a flash, hailed as a success. The other got completely bogged down, costing more and more in both lives and money. So let's get into it. All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at that surgical strike in Venezuela. Then, we'll contrast it with the grinding war in Iran. After that, we'll dig into the role oil played in both. And finally, we'll ask the big question: what does this all mean for the rules of international relations? Okay, first up, let's talk about the operation that, on the surface anyway, looked like a picture-perfect victory. Operation Absolute Resolve in Venezuela. I mean, just look at this timeline. The speed is just incredible. On January 3rd, U.S. Special Forces hit the ground in Caracas. That same day, we're talking hours later, they've captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. And by the very next day, the White House is already announcing its plans to essentially run Venezuela's oil industry. It was just unbelievably fast and decisive, exactly the kind of clean win military planners dream about. And this map really helps you see why that might have been possible. Look how close Venezuela is. For a long, long time, U.S. policymakers have seen this region as their sphere of influence or backyard. That proximity was absolutely a key factor here. It allowed for a very focused, close-range kind of mission. You know, there's actually a name for this kind of strategy. It's called a decapitation strike. And the idea is pretty much what it sounds like. You don't try to occupy a whole country, you don't fight a massive war, you just remove the head. The entire plan was built around capturing one guy, Nicolás Maduro, and betting that his whole government would just fall apart without him. It's a tempting strategy, for sure, because it promises big results without a long, messy war. So, what was the public justification for all this? Well, President Trump was very clear about it. He framed the whole thing in economic terms, saying Venezuela had stolen billions from American oil companies. So the stated goal wasn't just about changing the regime. It was about, in his words, taking back our property. All right, so that's the success story. A quick, clean operation. Now, let's shift gears and head to our second case, because when this same approach was tried with Iran, the results were, well, a complete disaster. And this is really the key takeaway from so many expert analyses. It seems like that easy win in Venezuela created a really dangerous sense of overconfidence. The thinking in the administration seemed to be, hey, if it worked in Caracas, why wouldn't it work in Tehran? As we found out, that was a huge miscalculation. The difference really boils down to the nature of the target. Taking out Maduro in Venezuela, that was like pulling a key block out of a Jenga tower. The whole structure was pretty shaky to begin with, and it just collapsed. But Iran? Iran is not a Jenga tower. It's more like a grand strategy game of Risk. You've got this deeply entrenched religious leadership, a powerful and loyal military. It's a state that's built to last. It's just a much, much tougher opponent. And the fallout from that miscalculation wasn't some far-off problem. It hit Americans right where it hurts, in the wallet. As the conflict threw the Middle East into chaos, you could see the impact right at the gas pump. Gas prices shot up from about $2.94 a gallon to almost $3.60 in just a single month. And way beyond the economic cost, there was a truly devastating human toll. A U.S. military investigation later found that a targeting error caused a Tomahawk missile to hit an elementary school, and scores of children were killed. What's so jarring is that this awful reality was happening at the same time the president was at a rally telling people the war was already won, but that troops couldn't leave early. The disconnect was just staggering. Okay, so that brings us to the one thing that really ties these two very different wars together: oil. But you'll see it actually played a very different part in each conflict. Let's just break this down. In Venezuela, the official story was about narcoterrorism, but the economic goal couldn't have been more explicit. Take the oil and let American companies rebuild things. With Iran, the stated goal was about weakening their military, but the unintended consequence was that it ended up threatening the flow of oil for the entire planet. And the stakes here were just astronomical. Iran sits on the Strait of Hormuz, this tiny little waterway where almost one-fifth of the world's entire oil supply passes through. A conflict in that spot doesn't just make your gas more expensive, it has the potential to trigger a full-blown global economic crisis.
So, beyond the battlefields and the price of oil, maybe the biggest, most lasting impact of all this is on the very rules that are supposed to govern how countries deal with each other.
So, at the heart of all international law is this really important idea called state sovereignty. It's a simple but powerful principle. A country's borders are its own, and other nations can't just interfere with what goes on inside them. The U.S. operation in Venezuela was a direct challenge to that core idea.
And the global reaction was swift and angry. The head of the UN called it a dangerous precedent. Even close allies like France said it undermined international law. And foreign policy experts immediately started warning that, hey, by breaking this rule, the US may have just given a green light to countries like Russia and China to do the exact same thing in their own neighborhoods.
And I think this quote from the Brookings Institution really nails it. They said that the damage done to international law, well, it's maybe less tangible than a captured president or a bombed-out building, but it is far, far more consequential. You're chipping away at the very norms that keep the world from falling into constant conflict.
And that really leaves us with this final crucial question. The strike on Venezuela, from the administration's point of view, was a tactical success. But when a powerful country breaks the established rules of the game and actually wins, does that create a new, much more dangerous game for everybody else?